to escaping communism. You can imagine the terror that I feel, when I see the state of the media and academia, and given the Democratic nomination, also politics. So my question to you is, why does Marxism refuse to die?
Marxism refuses to die because Marxism gives people a utopia to live for. There's a great book called Secondhand Time that I'm reading right now, which is kind of an oral history of the Soviet Union. It's from all these people who were, it just won the Nobel Prize in Literature in 2015. Great book. I highly recommend it. And it's all these people who lived through the Soviet Union and then the fall of the Soviet Union, and all these people who were really excited when the Soviet Union fell, but now it's been replaced by Putin's Russia, and they're nostalgic for the Soviet Union again. They want Stalin back. Stalin shirts are still selling out in Russia, where people's ancestors were being murdered. And there's a book by Daniel Yergin and Joseph Stanislaw called The Commanding Heights. It came out in 1999. And what they said is, by the end of the decade of the 90s, capitalism had defeated communism. But they said communism will come back, socialism will come back. And the reason is because in the 1930s, look at the Spanish Civil War, people were dying from the communist side. In the Spanish Civil War, it was communist versus fascist. People on the communist side were dying with the words, this was the rumor anyway, Stalin on their lips. Nobody dies with the words free markets on their lips. Nobody dies with the words nice house on their lips. And the fact is that because American conservatives have not pitched our case in terms of morality and decency and what's right and wrong and what's good and bad, we've instead pitched our case in terms of, look, here's some nice stuff. That's not a winning message. George Orwell wrote a fantastic essay. You should go back and look it up. It's the single best political essay ever written. 1940, he writes about why does Adolf Hitler's Germany rise? Why are young people signing up for Nazism when it clearly is such a flawed philosophy, deeply evil, guaranteeing blood and pain, right? And what he says is, what we here in the West don't understand is that nice houses and decent cars and enough food to eat, all of that's nice enough, but there's still a yearning in the human soul for something more. There's a yearning in the human soul for flag flying, and there's a yearning in the human soul for the sound of guns, right? I mean, there's a yearning in the human soul to fight for something, to make your life matter. Now, as religion declines in the West, and this has been one of the major factors, people don't find their meaning anymore in the idea that I am doing something good on behalf of my fellow man. Instead, they say, I need a utopia to belong to. I need a communal cause to identify with. That's why you see people marching in the streets. That's why you wouldn't see one of these kids who's doing this before stand up and do this by himself, right? You need a bunch of people to do it together. It's important because now you're part of something larger and you're brave and you're special. Right? You wouldn't do it as an individual. As an individual, you could actually have a conversation. But you're virtuous by membership in this clique. So the reason communism will rise again and is rising again and Marxism is rising again is because it says we're more moral, we will provide a utopia, and you can be part of building that utopia no matter how miserable you are. It doesn't matter if we dragged your parents off and killed them in the gulags. All that matters is that you are part of something great, that you are part of something wonderful. Right? And that's not what America is. America says it's your job to be a wonderful person. It's your job to take care of your family. You want to make America great again, okay? The way to do that is by making yourself and your family great again. The way to do that is by being a decent person, independent of trying to grab the levers of government and use them to shape humanity. That's what the founders thought making America great in the first place was all about. But we have to make that moral argument. We can never stop making that moral argument. And the more we make the argument that our policies just make you richer, people don't care. People don't care, especially in a rich country. In a poor country, people care. Right? In a rich country, it's all fun and games because we can talk until the cows come home about social justice, so long as we get to go home and sleep at night in our nice warm bed sponsored by the state at a top university. But it's a lot harder to talk about social justice when you're eating dogs because you have nothing else to eat, as they are in Venezuela, because all the shelves are empty. Thanks so much.
Ladies and gentlemen, this will be the last question.
Yes, and that transgender that grabbed you by the neck might be a direct result because people didn't listen to me. I'm the only person in 2003 that fought the International Olympic Committee over transgenders, and then it spread to, I sat with Jenner in 1976 before he set the record. And then it spread to the state high school leagues, and obviously it's going to go to the Supreme Court here, the bathroom bill, so I have a long history. I've taken the NBA on, NFL, all the major leagues teams. My question is, where is this all going to end up?
Well, I mean, the left always needs a new civil rights movement because all of them remember when they were actually in the right on civil rights in the 1960s. So they're constantly comparing everything to civil rights. Right? Gay rights are civil rights. Transgender rights are civil rights. It's always the next thing is just like when we were marching on behalf of black folks. back in the 1960s. And so after they obliterate gender, obliterate sex as a meaningful distinction, which is obviously silliness. You got the NBA boycotting North Carolina, or the NCAA boycotting North Carolina, but they still have separate men's and women's divisions, which is weird, right? If sex is just arbitrary, then why do you have women's divisions? Why can't it just be a bunch of 6'8" dudes who weigh 300 pounds, banging around in the paint with a bunch of 5'3" women, right? But the only way to, I think that the next step for the left, I've always said this, is taking their agenda and destroying the religious right. And so this has always been the purpose of, for example, same-sex marriage. I personally am libertarian on same-sex marriage. I think the government should not be a part of marriage, period. I think the government has nothing to do with it. And that's not because I'm morally for same-sex marriage. I'm not. I don't think that homosexuality is I'm a religious person. As a religious Jew, I believe there's such thing as sinful and not sinful. That doesn't mean that's public policy, right? Public policy is different than that. So when it comes to public policy, my feeling is that the government is really crappy at everything and hasn't promoted traditional marriage in any real way. When they tried to, it failed. Obviously, the government can't be the barrier between marriage and failure. That just doesn't work. I have personally 2 marriage certificates, right? I have the one from the state that I don't care about and it got lost sometime and I don't care. And then there's my Jewish marriage certificate, which is my ketubah, right? And that's the one that I cared about because it's the one that said I could have sex with my wife. And for religious people, by the way, that's how this works. If you go to the state and get your marriage license, that doesn't mean a lot unless you have a pastor, give the go-ahead. So the reality is that the state really has nothing to do with the marital institution. The only reason the state ever got involved was supposedly to promote procreation. The state has failed dramatically. So I want the state out of that entirely. But what the left is going to do is they're going to use the government-imposed same-sex marriage rulings in order to break every church in America. They're going to take schools, religious schools, and they're going to shut them down if they don't respect same-sex marriage. They're going to say if you don't educate your kids about the wonders of same-sex marriage, then you are discriminating against gay people and maybe against your own kid because you never know, they could be gay. Right? They're going to say that every church, every school, every religious institution in America must be discriminated against if they do not participate in whatever the left social agenda of the day is. And that's a much larger battle than all of these secondary silly battles about bathrooms in North Carolina and such. The left is always on attack. And because they're always on attack, it's incumbent on us to always fight back. We can never stop fighting back. And obviously not just fighting back, dismantling the roots of their agenda, exposing them for what they are, a bunch of people who are grasping and ambitious, a philosophy, more than a bunch of people, a philosophy that says your labor is not your own, your time is not your own, your freedom is not your own. Your labor, your time, and your freedom are all your own. And it is your job to use them to best effect. Thank you so much. Thanks for having me. The subset of climate scientists is not all that large, so I really don't care what a doctor in biology has to say about climate change. He knows as much as I do. So it depends on what they have a doctorate in, right? So you're right. There are a lot of climate scientists and climatologists who have said that global warming is an absolute fact, and anthropogenic global warming is an absolute fact. They have very different measurements as to how large that effect is going to be. There is a broad range among climatologists, as far as I can tell, among how much the climate is going to actually change and what is the direct impact of carbon emissions on that, given the fact that for the last 15 years there has been no global warming. The single largest study of global warming that was done in Britain, it turned out a lot of the data was actually kind of falsified. So I'm not saying that it's not happening. It may be happening. I'm happy to say that it may be happening. I may even be happy to say that it's probably happening. But again, unless you have a solution to the problem that does not involve killing off millions of human beings, no, but this is I agree, but the problem is that if you're going to make, this is another issue where the demonization is significantly more important to the left than actually solving the problem, right? So everything that the left says about climate change is basically, you're a climate change denier, therefore you're a fool, right? As opposed to, okay, maybe you're wrong about climate change denial, but here's the solution that you're ignoring. Where's the solution that's being ignored? Right? I'm sorry, it's not Holocaust denial. The use of the language denier is pretty ridiculous on its face, considering that that 30 years ago they were claiming there was going to be a grand ice age that was going to freeze us all to death. So, I'm willing to wait for the evidence to come in, especially given the fact that we don't have a good solution for it at this point. Once there's a plausible solution that the left actually wants to propose, we can talk about costs and benefits of it. But I also have to understand what exactly is the real imminent threat to human life. I mean, the idea that the gradual rise of sea levels is going to kill hundreds of millions of people it's just fantasy. It's just fantasy. It's not going to kill. They act like the day after tomorrow is how global warming is going to be. Right? Like a giant wave is going to sweep in, and then the next morning it will freeze, and all of New York will be under ice, and Dennis Quaid and Jake Gyllenhaal will be trying to fight their way through it. That's not how global warming is going to happen. Right? Global warming is going to happen, if it does happen, the rate they say it's going to, it's supposed to happen over the course of the next 100 years. So let's say, for the sake of argument, that all of the water levels around the world rise by let's say 5 feet over the next 100 years, say 10 feet by the next 100 years, and it puts all the low-lying areas on the coast underwater. Right, which let's say all of that happens. You think that people aren't going to just sell their homes and move? It's not like it's all going to happen at once. Like there's just a big tsunami that comes and wipes out everybody. So human beings have a way of adjusting. Human beings have a way of dealing with these things. And I have more faith in human beings to deal with the crucial move from Santa Monica to the San Fernando Valley than I do in okay, we're all